Resident Evil Revelations is better than it should be, and it isn't even a mainline title. But for me personally, it's better than most other mainline games. Honestly, as of right now, having played most of the Resident Evil games and a decent portion of their extra content, Resident Evil Revelations, to me, is around the third best game of the IP. I have not yet played Revelations 2, but I'm excited to see if it tops this one. For what it is, Revelations stands out by itself as its own game. Revelations does not have a story that directly affects the mainline games, and is never referenced in said games, save an Easter egg in Resident Evil 7. But it does canonically take place before Resident Evil 5 and supports its existence while providing some optional backstory for Chris and Jill. Before I get any further, I want to say that Resident Evil Revelations originated as a 3DS game at the beginning of 2012. It was re-released for PC, PS3, Xbox 360, and Wii U in May of 2013, along with raid mode updates that weren't on the 3DS. Speaking of raid mode, that brings us to the sponsor of this video. Me. I made this video without being paid to promote a certain other game. That questionable joke out of the way, let's talk about the general gameplay, and don't worry, I'll get to raid mode later. It's the main reason I wanted to make this video, as well as a source of a decent chunk of my playtime in the game. The main campaign and gameplay of Revelations is interesting. Despite being released in the middle of what I'd call the action trilogy of Resident Evil, Revelations still manages to maintain exploration elements that the series was originally known for. The story is segmented into chapters like Resident Evil 4 through 6, but doesn't cut off exploration in between chapters as much as these titles, especially 5 and 6. The main campaign also doesn't try to be a co-op game, and it's so much stronger for that. I mean, look at Resident Evil 5 and 6 solo campaigns. They are at least a little clunkier due to their arbitrary co-op inclusions. The main map and area of the story flows well together. In typical classic Resident Evil nature, the map is built to trigger some feel of claustrophobia by encouraging exploration in a tightly packed environment. Exploring the ship, where you'll be spending a majority of the game, unlocks ways of not only progressing, but also clearing out zombies with ease. As you progress through the map, finding ammo laying around is less common than other Resident Evil games. The amount of ammo in the map isn't great, but that's understandable when you have the Genesis, or the scanner. After the first story mission, you figure out how to use the scanner to obtain extra consumables, as well as getting an easy source of medical herbs. Herbs don't have to be combined, and are streamlined to be easy to use on the fly, with the accompanying sound effect from Resident Evil 5 and 6. Some people say the scanner is annoying, and just an obstacle getting in the way of playing and progressing the game. I can see where they're coming from, but I disagree. I personally enjoy the scanner. It's different and rewards micro-exploration, where the game might lack other exploration. Just touching the scanner and quickly looking around doesn't break my immersion. It's just a small hurdle to find more ammo, but it's somewhat streamlined unlike other survival horror systems. Also similar to the classic trilogy, puzzles are semi-common in this game. The most common puzzle is the power grid puzzle. While not super engaging of a puzzle, despite appearing often, it still does make me a little happy each time I see it. There's just something about a simple, straightforward puzzle that makes it so satisfying to beat fast. Even on my 4th time playing the game within a year, I still enjoy trying to solve these puzzles as quick and efficiently as possible, even if it seemingly may require a bit of brute force without thought. I don't know why I like that puzzle so much, but hey, I do. Anyway, when you find the shotgun on the ship, it's locked out of access and requires you to explore a little to release it. It's just like the shotgun in Resident Evil 7. But Revelations came out before it. Again, it's just nice to have exploration, albeit only some, to reward you with a new weapon. Like Resident Evil 5, you can hold multiple weapons at a time, up to 3. But in Revelations, you don't have to worry about ammo storage, only going over the cap, which can be expanded with in-game pickups. Even though they are hard to miss, finding them still requires exploration. Weapons can also be improved with weapon mods, which are rewarded from exploring the ship. Who would have guessed? There's just something about getting rewarded for exploring and finding something worthwhile. These mods can be transferred to New Game Plus if desired, but even if you couldn't, they still provide some extra content mixing and matching weapons and mods in your loadout. Resident Evil Revelations has a dodging mechanic that can be useful for avoiding damage entirely. Timing forward movement or a 180-degree turn at the right time will make the character dodge forward or dodge and turn around respectively. Timing dodges can be a bit wonky as they are spam-proof. Sometimes dodges work by accident, and other times they just don't work in general. Either way, dodging rewards players by keeping their herb count high and can be used to avoid instant death from a certain enemy. One of the last things I want to mention is Revelation's unlock system. As we progress through the game and get achievements or trophies, Revelations will give you an unlock that coincides with the criteria. I personally love when games do this. It encourages me more as an achievement hunter and gives me a little more tangible reward than just bragging rights like an achievement would. Plus, it just shows how much effort went into a game that was originally a 3DS exclusive. Obvious spoiler warning coming up, but before I recap the whole story, I want to talk about the episodic system that Revelations operates off of. It's not really story related, but it wouldn't fit in the gameplay section, so it's going here. Then I'll give you the real spoiler warning. Resident Evil Revelations has 12 episodes, each varying around 15 to 45 minutes. Each episode is segmented into 1 to 3 sections, and each episode has a recap that is given to you as you start the episode. A recap will also happen if you resume in the middle of an episode when relaunching the game. I like this system despite its very minor flaws. First off, having Revelations be episodic makes its multiple character-based story work really well. Secondly, leaving the game for a while and coming back just works in the player's favor. Some people play games far apart and not much at all. Revelations lets these players experience the game more fully by keeping them up to date on what they last did earlier in the game. The only downside, which is extremely nitpicky, is that you can't turn these off, and even if you hit play next episode, you're still forced to watch these. Or at least hit a button to skip them. Nobody should dislike these recaps. They don't really get in the way, and they make the game more accessible. Having to click an extra button to skip them isn't really an issue. Alright, now here's the real spoiler warning. Skip ahead to the story thoughts section if you don't want to get spoiled or if you don't care about the story. Revelations adds new characters into the universe. As far as I know, Chris and Jill are the only characters in the series who appear outside of this game in other mainline titles. Every other character is exclusive to this game, for better or for worse. Save a nod to the ex-BSAA head in Resident Evil 7. The story starts off with Jill and her current partner, Parker, working for the BSAA. They are searching a ship named the Queen Zenobia for Chris and his new partner, Jessica. The first episode serves as a tutorial, as one would assume. It both establishes the setting and also, well, functions as a tutorial. After exploring the ship briefly, the player gets a brief cutscene recapping a terror attack akin to Raccoon City called the Terra Grigia Panic. This cutscene establishes the FBC as a company that works alongside the BSAA to eliminate bioterrorism threats. The FBC was the primary reason why Terra Grigia was destroyed, again similar to Raccoon City. This transitions to the second mission of the game, which walks you through how to use the Genesis scanner, as you're walking the beaches near Terra Grigia. After this brief flashback, you get put on the Queen Zenobia and are again tasked with searching for Chris. After exploring the ship in typical Resident Evil fashion and finding a key on an extremely fresh corpse, you become trapped in a room and knocked out, ending the episode. This is a pretty decent opening for a game. In around 24 minutes, the game establishes its setting while teaching the player 80% of what they need to know throughout the game, while simultaneously providing questions that will remain unanswered until the time is right. Episode 2 immediately answers the "Where's Chris?" question, because why bother keeping us waiting? Chris is on a different mission with his current partner Jessica, attempting to find a trace of Veltro, the terrorist organization that initiated the Terra Grigia attack and was responsible for it. Unbeknownst to them, Jill is trapped on the Queen Zenobia searching for Chris's team. After finishing the mission, Chris is contacted by the BSAA head, Clive O'Brien, who updates us on what's going on. Upon finding out that Jill was set up, our perspective switches back to Jill. This section of the chapter teaches the remaining 20% of the game's basics and is more ingrained into gameplay. Since Jill's weapons were taken when she was captured, we learn how to dodge, solve door puzzles, and a little later in the mission, when we get our weapons back, we learn how to customize them. Explorative players may also find and access the shotgun. This chapter ends when Team Jill goes to the bridge of the ship to access its controls and runs into an unknown threat. Episode 3 starts with a flashback to the Terra Grigia panic, where you play as Parker and his partner at the time, Jessica. Parker is working with the FBC and is told by its head, Morgan Lansdale, to evacuate Terra Grigia. During this mission, you see who ambushed Jill and Parker back on the ship. More is explained upon wrapping up the rest of the mission, where your perspective shifts back to the present day, right where you left off. It shows that Parker knows who this man is, Raymond. The game establishes that Raymond is working for the FBC and is doing something suspicious on the ship. Every time this game answers a question, it leaves another question to be answered. We don't know why Raymond is there or what's going on in the background, but in time we'll find out. And no, thankfully it's not just a couple seconds later, the chapter takes a bit longer. After exploring the ship and killing the dead comms officer, re-killing the dead comms officer, you meet up again with Raymond and receive a video message from Veltro talking about releasing a waterborne virus known as the Abyss virus. This cuts to O'Brien telling other BSAA agents, Quint and Keith, call signs Jackass and Grinder respectively, to go investigate where Chris and Jessica were last, all while Chris and Jessica fly to a ship. Episode 4 starts off in the Queen Zenobia and ends with Team Jill going down to the ship's bilge for power. In the middle, you kill Raymond's undead ex-partner for a key. This specific episode is exploration focused and is one of the simpler episodes due to that. There's not really much to say in terms of story. Episode 5, on the other hand, puts the player into 3 different chapters. Chapter 1 and 3 show Quint and Keith's perspectives investigating where Team Chris was last played, while also introducing invisible hunters, which are annoyances but are fairly cool annoyances. I enjoy them even if they are a little tanky. Using your scanner to help track and counter them is a nice way to make more use out of this odd mechanic. This is the second out of 3 instances of invisible enemies in Resident Evil as far as I know. The other instances are the bonus mode from Resident Evil 2002 Remake, and a challenge mode in Revelations 2, which I am somewhat looking forward to playing. That being said, chapters 1 and 3 are short and don't overstay their welcome. Chapter 2, on the other hand, is a bit longer and does require exploration and a little backtracking. Jill and Parker are trying to turn the power on, but the build requires a different combination of levers being on and off in order to pass through the map. Thankfully, the game has a weird feature where walking in the water is far faster than it should be, for absolutely no reason. I guess it might be to make this chapter faster. It makes this chapter a little more enjoyable, zooming around everywhere. That being said, once the power is restored, the room starts to flood. Episode 6 shows Team Chris landing on a ship and speedrunning all the way down to where Jill is, but it turns out that Chris just landed on the sister ship, the Queen Semiramis, and not the Queen Zenobia. Chapter 2 is an escape sequence starring Jill as she tries to find air on the sinking ship. After not drowning, Jill gets to the top of the ship, fights a very dodge-intensive boss, and calls for backup. This boss is tanky, but honestly super fun to fight in my opinion. I love dodging his charges, and it was probably the most memorable part of my playthrough on Infernal difficulty. Yay, woo, 3 pages of the story and now we're halfway through. I'm trying to make it fast, accurate, and holistic. No one asked me to do this, but hopefully someone wants it. Anyway, episode 7 follows Team Jill, still, as they are tasked with finding and sending out a UAV to tank a blast from the satellite that nuked Terra Grigia so they don't die. Don't worry, I don't think it's supposed to make sense. Actually, it might be to redirect the lock-on. Hey, it's probably that. Either way, the mist blast from the satellite causes a tidal wave to hit the ship, which makes it start sinking. Episode 8 follows Jill trying not to drown and eventually making it to a safe place, confronted by someone from Veltro. Chapter 2 is an on-the-rail shooting segment with Chris riding up to the Queen Zenobia. It's a really short chapter, so thankfully it doesn't overstay its welcome, like most rail shooting segments in games. Upon finishing the chapter and arriving on the ship, perspective is shifted again back to Jill, where the mysterious Veltro personnel starts revealing some secrets of the story. Before they can say anything specific, they're gunned down by Jessica on site. The Veltro agent is revealed to be Raymond, and he whispers some revelations to Parker. Yeah, I know, revelations. This whispering is followed by find the truth about Terra Grigia. In Chapter 3, Chris and Jill finally meet up and explore some previously inaccessible rooms on the ship. It's pretty simple. Episode 9 is where the game becomes a little more streamlined and action-paced. It's the whole section that builds to where you earn the RPG. The first portion is a hold-off, where you play as Keith while Quint hacks into some database or something. After the hold-off ends, Quint sends the BSAA this information. This all happens as a missile is counting down to land and blow up the building that they're in. Back to Chris and Jill. As they are learning more about the Abyss virus and how the FBC is actually behind all of this, Jill injects herself with an Abyss virus vaccine and holds off some monsters. Episode 10 covers Parker as he makes his way off the ship. He encounters Jessica and finds out she's a traitor. Raymond arrives, revealing a bulletproof vest and how he didn't die earlier. Jessica shoots at Raymond again, and Parker takes the bullet. After switching perspective to Chris and Jill, the game guides you to Parker, where he's limping away. Jill carries Parker, and Parker falls into some flames. Some real tragic stuff. With no time to lose, Chris and Jill make it to the ship's deck. Episode 11 is a boss battle where you earn several RPGs to kill a giant Abyss virus thing that has taken over the ship. The second half of this episode is another Terra Grigia flashback chapter that recaps Parker saving Raymond's life. This was before the first flashback and takes place after a smaller scale battle and is not a whole evacuation sequence like before. The flashback ends with the FBC head receiving a call that could expose him. Back to the present day, Parker is still alive and is being saved by Raymond. The whole "you saved me, now I'm gonna save you" thing. You guys get it. The final cutscene of the episode reveals to us that there was a third sister ship, the Queen Dido. This sets up for the finale and a more enjoyable boss fight that the RPG spam fight on the ship didn't really deliver on. The final episode begins with a cutscene that shows BSAA head Clive O'Brien getting arrested for collaborating with Veltro, obviously set up by the FBC. Chris and Jill are the only people able to set this right. So after exploring the new ship for a while, they find Veltro's old leader driven mad by revenge, planning to take down the FBC for breaking their agreement. He injects himself with the T-Abyss virus a la Albert Wesker in Resident Evil 5 and drops evidence that would put the FBC chair behind bars. Upon trying to escape, he transforms into a fairly simple but interesting final boss. You need to dodge, probably use your scanner for ammo, and you have to be wary of some attacks. It's a final fight that feels well paced and is a nice bookend to the story, while also encouraging the player to use skills and weapon mods acquired throughout the game. When the boss finally goes down, he allows you to leave the room and the story wraps up. The BSAA is safe from the corruption of the FBC. The FBC no longer exists. Parker is alive, Quint and Keith are also alive, and Clive O'Brien stepped down from the BSAA, probably to write his book, The Unveiled Abyss. Raymond and Jessica are alive, and I hate this part of the ending. It's so dumb, it's sequel bait for no reason, and is allegedly never brought up again. Why does it exist? Let's pretend it doesn't. Okay, good. The ending is great. It's a nice bookend for all of the one-off characters. For Chris and Jill, well, their story ends a little bit differently. The game can't just forget about the mainline continuity. Chris and Jill won't be retired on an island sipping pina coladas. They have to come back into the business. Their epilogue of this game is the start of a new terror, Resident Evil 5, an insidious killer. My strong dislike for Resident Evil 5 out of the way, I like the direction they took with the epilogue for the recurring characters. It drops us right into the Resident Evil 5 prequel DLC and can serve as a perfect transition into playing through Resident Evil 5, however bad of a decision that may be. The story isn't really anything super groundbreaking or special. It's a nice little episode away from the mainline games, where we get a short story of Chris and Jill stopping bioterrorism threats. The story is self-contained, with several twists. Decent twists, nothing feels cheap and thrown upon the player out of nowhere. The writing reveals secrets at the right time, and rewards players for sticking around by giving them some revelations. Had to make that joke a second time. Joke aside, the story doesn't overstay its welcome, and it fits the episodic formula that it presents in very well. Raid mode is a secondary mode that adds more of the linear action feel to Revelations, giving the game some more replayability and diversity. The main campaign is more exploration focused, like the original trilogy, while Raid mode takes the same map, alters paths occasionally, and makes it more action focused. I like this, especially when the base game doesn't detract too much from the classic Resident Evil formula. at least compared to other entries such as the Resident Evil 4 through 6 trilogy. Raid mode provides a balance in the game as it holistically connects the two styles of play and resolves some of the identity crisis that happened around Resident Evil 5, where the series took a step in the wrong direction, more or less focusing completely on action. Once you beat the story, you unlock all maps in Raid mode. To be more specific, every 3 story episodes you beat, you unlock an average of 4 Raid mode missions. So progressing through the story is essential if you want Raid mode in its entirety. That's why I beat the game 4 times in a year. Once for the first playthrough, twice for achievement cleanup, thrice for unlocking my friend's Raid mode maps, and a 4th time to bring you this video. Honestly, I can understand Raid mode coming with this unlock criteria, but it's annoying to be frank. If I want to play a game cooperatively with my friend, I'd want to do it without having to spend 6 to 8 hours waiting to play with them before we could even take on all missions. That's probably my biggest critique of the entire game. That aside, I love Raid mode. I never really got into Mercenaries mode, it never really piqued my interest. The only time I ever even booted it was in Resident Evil 6 to get an achievement easier. Now, why is a side mode of a game that's basically a 3DS port so good? Raid mode takes the player through various stages and set pieces seen throughout the story, having the player defeat enemies and bosses while moving forward. Raid mode has external progression, quick gameplay sessions, and can produce some dumb moments. Some might call this passing the 3 AM test because I've spent some nights playing this game a little too late. When I started playing through Raid mode with my buddy Jake, we consistently did knife only. It was tedious but a fun time. During this whole endeavor, we also figured out early on that enemy positions are in fact client side, meaning some enemies can be in unexpected places when comparing to the other player. This didn't affect us too much, it just made the game a little more enjoyably janky. After our knife only goal became unfeasible, we finally got to see the depth of Raid mode and its progression. Attempting knife only and not using weapons took away a decent portion of replayability and experimentation from Raid mode. Within missions, you can find ammo, points, weapon mods, and even extra weapons, assuming you find a specific enemy, which is like a little pufferfish that's spiky and stuff. It's cool. Let's call him George. I don't know why we're calling him George, but let's just call him George. Anyway, if you kill George, you get a weapon. That's cool. Weapons unlocked during Raid mode can have tags, may come with extra mods, and can only be used at or above their respective level. Speaking of tags, you can get a sniper with the steady hand tag that lowers recoil and raises the crit damage, or an SMG with the speed shot tag, which raises fire rate and capacity. These tags apply to a weapon by default and modify their base stats. Once you have these weapons, you can add more mods to them to make them stronger all around, or play into their strengths even more. Build customization in Raid mode is fairly in-depth, and I haven't even talked about the characters and their synergies yet. Each character has their own stats that can influence their playstyle. Maybe they have a stronger melee, maybe they buff pistols or other weapon classes, or they could even have some extra utility packed in with regeneration. Since these come with in-game achievements or trophies, I haven't even unlocked all characters and costumes, so I have yet to experience everything. There's a total of 25 costumes, and each provides a unique bonus that may impact playstyle. As I've hinted at before, there are modifications that you can put on your weapons, just like in campaign. These come in all shapes and sizes. Well, never mind, they all look the same. But that's beside the point. These mods can do the whole generic stat increase thing like you've seen in every other game, but they can also have utility in the form of higher point gain, ammo efficiency, and auto-firing, so you don't need to worry about missing. Honestly, there's so many mods, and I'd waste a lot of time just listing the ones I have, and that's only a drop in the pond. Not only can you find mods in the game, but you can also find them in the shops. The in-game shop has guns, mods, ammo refills, and account buffs like ammo capacity, body armor, and storage. The stock for guns and mods always updates when you exit, so if you see something you want, you might reroll it when you exit the store, which can be a good or a bad thing. Now, when I said in-game shop, I did mean to imply that there is an out-of-game shop. It's not very accessible, and the game doesn't really tell you about it, but it's cool and I kind of like it. This shop is found on ResidentEvil.net, which you can access on any browser. For short, we'll just call it re.net from now on because I'm not going to say the whole thing. If you want, you can link an account to get benefits and participate in events. On re.net, you can buy weapons or weapon mod cases, and send them to your game using RE points gained from doing various challenges in other Resident Evil games, or this game, and participating in events. It's a cool addition. It doesn't get in the way of playing the game too much, and it might as well not exist if you didn't look for it. It's not required by any means, but if you want a little extra of the game, it's out there. I've used it a couple times to send items to my account, and might participate in events in the future. Raid mode is in-depth, and unless if you have an encyclopedic mind and can figure everything out by yourself, there's no way you can know everything about the whole mode without looking up stuff online. It's honestly too in-depth for a game that was a 3DS exclusive for over a year, but that's not really a bad thing. Enemies in raid mode have specific weapon resistances and weaknesses. This is something that one may discover on their own, but not to the full extent that a guide can help with. It's easy to see that some enemies are more resistant to snipers and weaker to melee, but keeping track of each enemy would be insane. There's a guide that does a great job of charting out enemy weaknesses if you desire to min-max everything about raid mode. Like weapons, enemies can also have tags. Some enemies will have stronger attacks, be tankier, be smaller but quicker, and some are better all around. These enemies are differentiated by a symbol next to their health bar. Although these enemies are predetermined in maps and will always spawn, they still bring some variety to each encounter. Raid mode's unlock criteria is the worst part of the mode, being tied to finishing the game in its entirety. However, there's one other factor that takes a little away from my experience in raid mode. After completing the first run of raid mode on the default difficulty Chasm, you unlock the second difficulty Trench, which basically makes raid mode a new game plus. My problem with the higher difficulties is that they really are just repeat levels. There's no new environments or anything like that. You just start from the beginning of mission 1 and progress normally until the final mission. The only difference being that after beating the first mission on Trench, you unlock the second. Upon beating the second, you unlock the third, and so on. Having repeating maps is honestly more of a minor inconvenience, and isn't even an actual complaint or reason to dislike raid mode. Having repeat maps as a sort of way of getting more content seems a bit lazy on the developer's behalf, but it isn't something that exactly detracts from the mode. Honestly, after writing this paragraph, I realize I'm just making up an issue that doesn't impact the game too much, if at all. Sure, playing on the same map can be boring, but if the enemies are a bit harder, then it shouldn't matter that much. 20 different stages is enough, especially when considering Ghost Ship, which I'll bring up in a second. When you complete Trench difficulty in raid mode, you don't only unlock Abyss difficulty, but you also unlock boost items. These items can be bought for a hefty price, and will increase your weapon stat depending on the weapon and the stat type respectively. These weapon boosts are applied to one weapon at a time and permanently boost this weapon's stats. Each weapon can stack up to 30 boosts. I'm playing through raid mode a bit slow and haven't gotten the chance to see boosts in the store, but I'm looking forward to finishing off Trench, Abyss, and giving Ghost Ship a realistic chance with good weapons and boosts. Upon finishing all maps on Abyss difficulty, you should be at or at least near max level, and should be ready to take on Ghost Ship. Ghost Ship, as I didn't mention before, is a long endurance run throughout the ship. Basically a super raid mode map. Ghost Ship is technically unlocked when beating the campaign, but also shouldn't be attempted until after beating every level. Its recommended level is 50 after all. Honestly, Ghost Ship is the end goal of the game. If anything other than getting all bonuses, Ghost Ship is the endgame. If people grind out Resident Evil Revelations past the 100% achievements, they are likely going to be grinding Ghost Ship, for a better score, or just for fun with different builds. Eventually, I'll get to this point of the game, but that'll be in some time. I still need to get 100% on this game by beating all raid mode levels to begin with, let alone trying for S ranks and Trinity bonuses. That being said, what are bonuses and why do they matter? Well, that's the funny thing. They don't matter. Nothing really matters. Jokes aside, they give you more XP and give you some excess challenges to do while grinding out the mode. In total, there are 4 bonuses per map per difficulty. There's one for taking 0 damage, the second for killing all enemies, and the third for being underleveled. When finishing a mission with all 3 aforementioned bonuses at the same time, you are awarded with the Trinity bonus, giving you even more XP and some positive reinforcement. The funny thing about the underleveled bonus is that it may initially appear to be impossible over time. Well, thankfully it isn't. In the character select menu of raid mode, The game allows you to choose the level that your character and the weapons they use will be scaled to. Obviously, there's no going from level 12 to level 50 just because you feel like it. You have to, at very least, earn level 50 first. Being underleveled can also enable more challenging repeats of previous levels, therefore increasing replayability. While underleveled, you will still get XP and level up, so replaying missions for their Trinity bonus isn't something that completely stops progression. I love the whole concept of de-leveling, and honestly raid mode does it justice. Honestly, everything about raid mode I like, in concept and execution. Sure, it's not the most complex side mode, sure I haven't even gotten through half levels, sure gameplay sessions don't last as long as Call of Duty Zombies, and sure I haven't even locked everything by a long shot. But it's a great side mode that can completely function as its own independent game. That's honestly where a lot of side modes shine. The only real complaint that I have about it is its unlock criteria being tied to the main campaign, but that's not a complaint about raid mode specifically. Resident Evil Revelations is way better than it should be. It isn't a mainline title, it was initially a 3DS port, but it has such an in-depth and progression-heavy side mode, and you just can't not love it. Its story is quick and interactive. It's not really straightforward, but it also isn't convoluted. Part of the epilogue is unnecessary, but that's all of my complaints for the story itself. The gameplay in the campaign is streamlined, and in my 50 hours of the game so far, I have yet to experience any game-breaking bugs, other than a humorous desync issue in co-op raid mode. If you like this video, leave a like. If you've played Resident Evil Revelations before, tell me about how you feel in the comments. I'd love to see how you guys feel about this too good to be true 3DS port. If you want to support the channel and see more videos, subscribe. You know the whole deal. I don't need to tell you what to do, even though I kind of just did. Hey, I'm just trying to get engagement like YouTube wants me to do. It sucks that I have to do it, I don't feel like it, I feel like I'm begging, but that's why I put it at the end of the video so I feel a little less guilty. Anyway, have a great day, night, or whatever it is for you, and I'll see you next time.